the first thing I've got to talk to you about is that the February 3rd edition of the Observer reports that Randy Savage has officially re-signed with the company for a limited amount of dates and $1 million per year. Ted, did you ever imagine when you were breaking into wrestling that anyone would be getting paid that kind of money?
No.
How could you, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of like the old NFL and the new NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of, like I'm sure there's a lot of very old football players who were still alive. Maybe not too many of them, but back when the whole thing started, and talk about what they were getting paid. And, when football season's over, it wasn't like they could live off of what they had earned. They had to go get a job.
Right.
Or they had to work another job. Well, that's the same thing with wrestling. It's kind of like that kind of money was almost unheard of,
It's just crazy because, as a kid, I'm watching and I just assume that everybody on screen is a millionaire. I'm like, well, there's an action figure of this guy. Of course he's a millionaire. You know what I mean? But then it's like you find out years later that some guy's just working like a regular job. So it's hard to make a full-time living in wrestling for like decades upon decades, like you and Jim and so many others did, right?
Yeah. And the toll it took on our bodies. I mean, by the grace of God, it's like I haven't had any real serious injuries. I had and this showed up years later. This is like the doctor, the way he described it. He says, "What's the basic bump you took, Ted?" And I said, "From my feet to my back." And so he says, every time you hit that mat, he says, because what I had done is I had herniated 2 discs in my neck.
Mm-hmm.
And, the whole thing there that, like when you take a bump as a wrestler, you always do this. You tuck your chin and it becomes second nature, because, you don't want to hit the mat and knock yourself out. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, but he said time after time after time after time, he says, it affect, so I had 2 discs, I think, the disc between C5 and C6, those 2 discs, I had those, they take them out and they replace them with something that's, artificial, but it's fused. But I have found out there are a lot of guys like me that have had the same surgery.
Oh yeah.
I think Jake had it.
Yes, sir. He did, and a number of other guys that I've heard about have dealt with this, with herniated discs in their neck. And I'm sure you're right; it probably has everything to do with bumping. And here's the thing: is everybody has to take bumps, including these guys who then had to go on and get shoot jobs, as they call them. Working security or doing whatever. It's like, man, a lot of very fortunate folks have managed to make a living in wrestling, for their whole lives and not have to do that. So, man, God bless you guys. But when you hear this figure from Savage that he's making this amount of money, now for context, they also had the Slim Jim deal as a result of getting Savage, which brought them, it was something like $500,000 or $600,000 a year. So really, WCW is paying Savage whatever, it's $500,000 or $400,000 a year. So, but still, he's making $1 million a year, so it's an awful lot of money. Like when you hear a figure like that, is there a piece of you that's like, God damn, I should have kept working? Or are you in a comfortable enough position that you're satisfied making what you're making?
Well, I never made that much, but, I wasn't too far off. But, by the same token, by the grace of God, I made enough money, and the other thing I did is I saved my money. A lot of guys, it's kind of like, I remember this guy's name his name is Bill Dromo, old wrestler. You'd probably have to look him up. He was, I had this conversation with him in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in a Waffle House. Late at night, like 2:00 in the morning after a show. And I was very young at the time. I had just started. I think it was like the first summer I worked in 1975, and he said that to me. He says, "Kid, if you don't remember anything else I tell you, remember this: it's not how much you make; it's how much you save." He
Yeah.
says, "There's a lot of people who've made great money in our business, and they blew it all. With the wild living, and what's the song? How does Rick sing the song?
What is it like? The limo riding and jet flying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Was that what you mean, Rick
yeah,
Flair?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I don't, and again, Rick's my friend. I love him to death. I don't know how, and obviously he made very good money. Uh, you know, but I would venture to say if Rick could go back now and go, golly, man, maybe I should have saved some more. But I mean, and I don't know how well off he is. I mean, obviously he's not having to go out and find a job. So
No.
he did very well, but but he he was notorious for spending a tremendous amount of money in the bar.
The old thing with Rick was he would always tell people, "I've spent more money on spilled liquor than you made in a year," and some people have, like, done the math on that and said, like, "It might be true because he was apparently buying shots for the whole bar and, like, throwing some of the
Oh yeah,
shots over his
oh yeah,
shoulder.
oh yeah,
So, man, that's a man that is, if nothing else, he's lived a hell of a life.
yeah, yeah.
But hey,
And
that
and to Rick's credit, Rick was one hell of a worker.
yes, he
Absolutely.
was.
Nobody could take that from him.
Hey,
He and I never we worked a few times, but man, I would have loved to have been able to just work a whole program with him.
there's
So,
footage out there that I saw recently of you and he working in Mid South, but yeah, like you guys, to your point, you guys never really got a full blown program with some
yeah,
storytelling and stuff. It was just a match. So,
yeah,
man, could have been something. But yeah, it's funny to hear that you learned that lesson in the Waffle House. It just goes to show that really wonderful things happen in Waffle House every time you go in there.
yeah.